Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Daily Coin. My name is Rory, and today is Wednesday, September the 21st, 2016, and I have the very distinct honor and great pleasure of welcoming back to the show for the first time in way too long, Mr. Louis Cammarosno from smallgold.com. Louis, how you doing today?
Rory, I'm doing splendid.
Well, we've got a pretty serious show coming up, so let's just jump right in. What do you say?
Let's get at it, Rory. We should have our own rock
That's
and
a
roll
very good
show.
question. What's going on the PM scene? Precious
So
metals. I know that
let me see.
Eric Dubin made a call last Friday, when they did the markets and metal update or metals and markets update,
Uh-huh.
and that his call is coming into full view today. And today is what is today? Wednesday, the 21st.
21st. You know, the Fed's meeting today. They're supposed
The
to come
Fed
out
is
with their,
meeting in just a couple hours. It's about 12:30 Central right now.
you know what they do, Rory. It's really sad. Is they have stretched this thing out so much. So even if they don't do it in September, they'll be out the next day or today talking about December. They can't let it go. And
No,
they've managed to keep people focused on the next meeting, the next meeting, the next meeting. And no one is. And once people get to the point where they're ready to throw in the towel and say, these guys are full of it, they hit you with the full on yak attack. Oh, no, no, on the table. Rate hikes are possible. Yes, at the next meeting. We're close to, they all come out and they make this big show like, please take us seriously. They pound the table. And then the markets react. I'm
yep,
not just talking about precious metals. All the markets react
all
as
the
if
markets, all
the,
over the world.
the dollar goes up, the precious metals go down, the markets freak out, and no one wants to say they're crying wolf. Even the people that should know better. The only people that are have that really have lost that have really decided the Fed has no credibility are people in the alternative media. And now Donald Trump. He came out the other day and he said it's a disgrace what they've done. They're doing this for political reasons. They're keeping interest rates low, just so he says so they can raise them when the next guy gets in, meaning him. And he was taking a task for that on CNBC, saying he's making outrageous statements. And no, he's not. The
No,
article that was saying he was making outrageous statements, Rory, said that he should know better. The Fed's been trying desperately to raise rates, like some heroic efforts going on. Like,
right. All they have to do is say we're going to raise rates, and
and then
here's what
do
the
it.
new rate is.
Yeah, I mean, this apology for the Fed that somehow they really want to raise rates. They just, for whatever reason, they just can't get around to it. And
The lead on their pencil is broken, so they can't scribble out the message that says, "Here's the new rate."
yeah, or their dog ate the home. I mean, it really is as pathetic as
It's
the dog ate my
pathetic.
homework. And but that's where we are, and I don't know what's going to happen today. One thing I thought might be possible is their bluff could be called. Trump is saying that Yellen should be ashamed of herself. He also said that they'll always do the political thing. They insist they're not political. So if they really wanted to kind of one up the whole world, they could do a shock interest rate hike and say, so there. Now, that would be biting their nose to spite their face, because if
Right.
they're trying to do is elect Hillary, well, they just ensure, and that's probably why Trump is taunting them. It's like, go ahead, raise rates, go ahead, raise rates. Let's have a market collapse, and then see if you can bring Hillary Clinton in to save Obama's economy. That's not what people are going to be thinking. They're going to be thinking again, Donald Trump was right. Look what happened. So I don't know if they're going to raise rates, but that's one possibility. They might do that. I don't think they will. They'll do what they probably always do and say December is a live meeting, and then at that point maybe they will raise rates just for their credibility. And so instead of doing the six that they promised, remember they were saying they were going to do six.
Four. I thought it was
Then
four.
no, it was six. Then it was four, and
Then
now
it
it's
was
been
two.
and now it's one. And then they could say, well, we did two, and it's December, and so they managed to say that they got the rate hike in December when no one's looking. That's what they did last year.
That's what they did last year, and then look at what happened in January. It was the worst opening in the history of the stock market.
But Rory, right now, look where it is. It's at all-time high. So
Yeah.
that
Well, I
just
mean, and
shows you.
why is that? I mean, if we go back and look at why it's at all-time highs, it's because of exactly what former Dallas Federal Reserve President Richard Fisher said. This is front-loaded wealth effect.
Absolutely.
He said that. We did that. Just like Bernanke told Milton Friedman in 1992, yes, we created the Great Depression. Told him that right to his face. And he said, we're sorry, we'll never do that again. And
Yeah,
they're
well,
doing it again. The exact same setup across the board. Exact same.
they have too much control over markets, not necessarily the economy, but they have too much control over markets, and they get more and more each time they're fiddling with markets screws up and harms the economy. Full stop. I mean, that's what happens every time there's a collapse or a crash in the markets. They right now they're doing pre-bail-ins by buying equities. They already own the company, so they don't have to like go and buy them once they go down. They're buying them now to make sure they don't go down.
Right.
They're propping up the markets. They're buying corporate bonds. These are things that were never done before. Yellen's talking about broadening the scope of assets that the Fed, future policymakers at the Fed might want to consider. Haven't they done enough? I had a
Haven't
broad.
they done enough
It,
damage?
it wasn't bad enough that they bought 80-90% of the newly issued U.S. Treasuries during QE. It wasn't bad enough that what did they do? They bought those mortgage-backed securities, which are useless. Now she's saying we might want to buy a broader range of assets, and she said, and it may require legislation, which means they may have to go back to Congress and say, look, we have a problem. The stock market went down. We want to buy equities. What do you say? And Congress will start, oh, no, we can't do that. Never been done. And then they'll threaten them, and then they'll say,
Right.
okay, go ahead. And now then it'll become normal for central banks to own equities.
Well, they
It's just
already they already
unbelievable.
do. They
Well,
already
but the
own
Fed,
equities.
doesn't. What she did say, which was interesting, like other central banks. In other words, we're behind the curve over here because other central banks already have a CME group, where they can buy futures at a discount on COMEX. Now, the Fed doesn't have that discount because they're not involved in doing it yet. But I can see a day where the Fed decides they need overt, not just covert to the exchange stabilization fund, but the Fed itself wants to go into the market with a $2 trillion, $4 trillion program and buy stuff that they're not allowed to buy. So they get congressional approval. Now they got more control. And then they go to the CMA group and they say, why are you giving these foreigners special discounts to buy futures contracts and gold and silver and everything else? How about us? And CMA group will say, sure, we can take the business. It's just unbelievable what's happening. And that's why I'm concerned about all these collapse scenarios, because it's not like when what's the word? When the dust settles, everything's going to be fine and the free market's going to take over. I wish that were the case. They won't let it.
No.
They own the game. They own the casino. Casino burns down. They just build up a bigger one with more controls on it.
Well, and everything that you've just described is on the eve of the yuan being added to the SDR basket of currencies. It is on the eve of China issuing the first round of the new MSDR bond
Hmm.
that is designed specifically to replace U.S. Treasuries. And there, as far as the game that the Fed is currently playing, this current round, it probably is taking that into consideration. And as far as the Fed coming out and buying equities or stocks, I mean that may be the only thing that they can do to save themselves, because whatever they are going to do, whatever they do, every policy, every time that they open their mouth and say something, it is for the specific purpose of saving themselves and their member banks. No other reason. They have
Also, I would add the dollar too.
that's their product. That's what they
Yes,
own.
if
So
they
of
don't,
course it is.
if they don't boost the dollar, they can't protect anything else. The dollar is the product, so they have to boost the dollar, and that's why they talk up the rate hikes all the time, even though they never come.
But as far as people having this misconception that the Fed is somehow speaking in regards to protecting the citizens, or this is for the benefit of the citizens, it is not. It
And
has
Hillary
nothing to
Clinton is
do.
a wonderful public servant,
Hillary Clinton is a wonderful public servant. Of
honest and trustworthy.
Yes, and it has nothing to do with any of that. Nothing at all. It is for the sole purpose of protecting themselves and their member banks and protecting their product, which is the dollar. That's the only reason that they say anything, or that that any policy is ever put into place.
Now,
Period.
Rory, the SDR, people keep saying, and I think it's erroneous, that the United States is harmed by the yuan entering the SDR. They are, in a sense, that they're on the stage with China. However, when they redid the allocations of the SDR in order to bring in the yuan,
Hmm.
the United States dollar didn't lose one bit of it. All got lost from mostly from the euro, and some of it from Japan, the yen, and the pound. So the United States still has 43% of that SDR, which, by the way, is useless because the SDR is only a representation of the fiat currencies that it's supposedly it's a basket of currencies, and it's supposed to represent fiat currencies, but it's not even backed by actual fiat currencies. So it's a bluff upon a bluff. It's just, here we say that this is 42% dollar, although there's no dollars in the basket. There's certain amount of yen and there's certain amount of, but there's no yen or yuan in the basket. And it's a basket of deplorables in a way,
It's
the SDR.
it's an illusion of a mirage.
Exactly.
That's all that it is.
It's like an enigma wrapped inside of a riddle, or whatever Churchill once said. Uh, it's really unbelievable that they've pushed this SDR concept. And the reason I'm annoyed at the SDR concept is it's not a reset. It's just rearranging the deck chairs, because it's still a fiat system. Well, Rickard, so they're going to add gold to it. So what? It's still a central bank run financial system. And you just add China to it. That doesn't help anybody. See,
Actually, it does. It doesn't help the citizens. You have to
correct.
remember, once
Yes,
again, this is not about helping us here at Ground Zero. Period. It's not.
exactly.
It's about protecting the oligarchs and protecting the member banks. You have the World Bank, you have the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, you have the Bank for International Settlement, the BIS, you have the central banks,
And do you think
and it's
China,
about
Rory?
protecting them. It's
Correct, but
about their protection.
do you think, and this is what kind of astounds me, that somehow China wants just to do battle with all those entities? Or do you think they want to co opt, control, play nice with them, do their own stuff? I mean, why would they destroy half or three-quarters of the world's financial system just so we cheer it on? I mean, that doesn't make any sense when they can do both. They're playing with the system, they're creating their own systems, and none of that does us any good. I mean, it's not like China is going to be this benevolent new communist country that comes in, controls the financial system, and now we have free markets. No, what they're going to do is they're going to set up their own systems, dominate that for sure with the AIB and all the things that you've written about on the Silk Road, and on all the things with the yuan, and then they're also going to have a big say in the Western system. They have no interest in crashing that Western system when they can extract wealth from that and
Right. They
extract.
don't want to. They don't want to crash it. I mean, nobody wants to upset the apple cart. That's
Well, if they're
not
going
the
to own the
goal.
apple cart, why do you want to kick it over? It's just like when
Correct.
Hitler invaded France. He didn't bomb the Eiffel Tower and destroy half of Paris. He figured if he's going to own France, he's going to leave it alone.
Right.
There's value there. There's no point. They have $1.3 trillion worth of U.S. Treasuries. China does. Why would they want to collapse the value in those treasuries? Because they're
Now,
fed up. No, that's people. That's kids saying they want. That's like somehow Chinese policy that's developed over centuries is based on your emotion. Like they're gonna stick. They're gonna go to the Comex and like crash it. Why would they do that?
no,
They're
they're
not.
no. What they're going to do is they're going to convert. That's the whole purpose behind the MSDR bond, is to
Mhm.
convert the U.S. Treasuries into their bond and
Exactly, and it's a slow process.
move it up to the global level and remove that power from the U.S. Treasury.
Right, and that's a slow process, though, Rory.
It's a
That's
slow process. However, it it's I don't think that it's going to be that slow, because you
well.
have to remember that how many banks this whole banking system that China has built out over the last 3 or 4 years. Like you said, the AIIB, then you have the BRICS Bank, then you have the New Development Bank, and you have
Mhm.
the there's there's a whole host of them. There's at least 3 or 4 other ones aside from those three that I just listed, and then you have the equivalent within Russia. Russia and China are aligned, regardless of what anybody says. You cannot talk about one without talking about the other. They are almost joined at the hip.
Which has
And
historically not been the case,
right,
which is new now. And I'll add to that, Rory. I don't know if you saw this, but Russia's VTB Bank, which is their second largest lender, has plans to supply 15 to 20 tons of gold to China in the next 12 months. Now that's pretty fascinating. As if China doesn't or isn't already the world's largest producer of gold with 450 tons produced a year. Russia is probably the second, probably ahead of Australia with about 320, 350. And China can't get enough gold, so it has to work through Russia to pick up an extra 20 tons a year. And then it says the VDP says it aims to supply 80 to 100 tons of gold a year in the future. So they just started shipping this gold over to China. So you're right. That highlights that they are working together. And what's the need for gold? I mean, see, the thing about China, it
right.
does need more gold than Russia because Russia already has about 12 to 15% of its reserves. It's got about 400 billion in reserves, of which it has 1,528, I think, at the most recent tons of gold at the most recent announcement as of end of August. So, as a percentage of reserves, Russia is getting there for gold. China, though, has 4 trillion in reserves, and they don't have that much gold in reserves on the People's Bank of China. Even if you roll in all the gold that people say they have, as a percentage of reserves, it's still below 10%. So China, if it's going to support its currency with gold, is going to need help from Russia's mines, I suppose, to get more gold into their reserve system because Russia's economy is much smaller, the reserves are much smaller. They can continue to build up their reserves and be fine, but China is going to need, it has a voracious appetite for more.
And they need more. And as far as what you were saying, they need more gold to back their currency. I'm beginning to understand why Rickards has been saying, and he's not the only one of the people that deal with the policies that these oligarchs are writing, these bureaucrats, these unelected bureaucrats within the IMF and the BIS, and you start looking at their documents, and they're not all talking about gold, but it's definitely being recognized at this point there that there may be a need to have gold within the system in order, if for no other reason, to stabilize the change that is now policy to move away from the world reserve currency system that is the Federal Reserve note, the US dollar, into a new system, which is going to be SDR based. That's already going to happen. That's in the works. That is the go forward model, and they've broken out the SDR into three different SDRs, and you have the O SDR, which is the official. That's the one that's been around since
68, I think,
yeah,
69.
68, yeah, late 60s. And then you have the new MSDR, which is one that can be issued by any of the members. And then you have the RSDR, which is I don't want to say because I'm not 100% on its role, but it has a very defined role, and then so you have these three different SDRs that are going to make up this new system. Period. Like I said, it's already in play. They've already signed off on it. Now, and that when is that going to take effect? I don't know. I know that all of the steps, the first step has already been signed off on and is going in place at the end of business on September the 30th when the yuan is added to
Right.
the basket of currencies. Another step that's been taken, it's been signed off on, and is going into place before the U.S. election. They were trying to get it issued before the G20 meeting on September the 4th or 5th, and they missed that deadline, but they're not going to miss the U.S. election, and that's the issuance of the first round of the MSDR bond, period. They're not going to miss that cutoff because that is the signal to the United States that we are here and we're not going anywhere, period. And my gut feeling is that all of the banking system that China has already put into place, those banks have already been ordered to buy every one of the bonds that come out, and you're going to get this percentage, and you're going to get that percentage, and you're going to get another percentage, and right down the line. And that whole first issuance is already spoken for.
It's been sold, right?
It's already sold. They're just waiting on it to hit the market so that they can transfer the money. That's it.
But can't you see how that's exactly the same type of controlled market that we complain about here?
It's the
It's
same thing.
it's exactly the same thing, and that's why I don't understand the concept that somehow, and Rickards pointed this out. He said China's not going to come riding to our rescue.
No,
It's just
no.
foolish to think China's going to crash the COMEX. China's going to put gold. The only thing that would help, and it would still be a total control and a total fix, is if the central banks decided, as part of the SDR, to add gold and fix the price of gold at like some $7,200, some ridiculous amount.
Well,
And that,
that is, and you have to, and people give Rickards a hard time, but guess what? He is in these meetings that we will never be privileged to. He is sitting down and having dinner with the people and discussing what is actually happening.
right?
And
They
I want to
want
be
to.
very clear about this. I'm not defending Rickards or anybody else, but the facts are the facts. That if you have the information, if you are privileged to the policy meetings, then you have the information. You have you've got everything that is needed to be able to write the things that he writes. So I'm not defending him at all, but facts are facts.
Right, they want to do this, and the big cut against doing it is there's not enough gold in the world. And Rickard's point is, well, no, of course there's not. You just have to raise the price.
Right, exactly.
Now,
That's right.
if you do raise the price, but remember, that's a one-off. It's just like what happened in, only you get the benefit of it, supposedly. Maybe you don't. But when they confiscated gold in 1933, they said, okay, the gold price is $20.67. Here you go. Give us your gold. And then they revalued it at 35. Now,
Right.
who knows what they would do this time? But it's still, I mean, philosophically, it's still the same thing. Even if you benefit from it, it's still a totally fixed and controlled market if they say now the price is $7,200 and now you can cash your chips in. But now you're done. Now you have, there's no other chance for you to make, maybe that sets you up for life, maybe, and you don't need to worry about it. But the more frightening thing is then it's just a total global control. Here's a question for you, Roy. How much are eggs in your area?
It depends.
Okay. And they're probably totally different than the price is in my area. But somehow the price of gold is the same everywhere, other than maybe in some parts of India where there's these discounts. But that's what kind of control they have over these precious metals. It's a global price. And they fixed the price of gold globally at $35 in 1934, right? All the way
Right.
up to 1971. That was the price of gold. It was $35 everywhere, no matter where you were in the globe. Now, it would be a good thing if it was $7,200 forever and you happen to have a few ounces. But then that's it. Then there is no gold market. Gold is now a government owned, government priced commodity once they set that. And that
Yeah.
just gives them further control. So unless you've cashed in out of that, there's no such thing as gold and freedom, right? Because gold is $7,200 an ounce, and that's it. And that would put out a price for anybody to buy. And of course, that would make people say, well, let's go to silver. So we're bootstrap off of that. But still, it's a control system that I don't like. When they go to a gold standard, they fix the price. And they fix it far more than they manipulate it now. It's just set.
That's a good argument.
Well, it's thinking past the windfall.
Right.
I mean, if you're hoping for a windfall, that's one thing. But then what do you do after you win the war? You've you got some now you got some cash, okay, but you can never buy gold again with it because it's not going to go up. It's $7,200, and if you don't turn it in, it's never going to go up anymore. So now you don't have the freedom in your pocket anymore because they've basically priced it.
Well, yeah,
That's why I
that
don't like this whole central bank in China and Russia and all the because they are as monolithic as anything we have on our side.
yes. And as far as what I believe that China and Russia are looking at is they don't really care about the West.
No, don't care about
They
they don't care
haven't
about Rory or
for a
Lewis.
long time. They haven't for a long time because they haven't, the Chinese in particular. The Chinese have never forgotten about the Opium Wars. They've never forgotten that. They haven't. Now is their opportunity to reassert themselves as the global economic engine that they were all the way up to the time of the beginning of the Opium Wars.
And going over to Russia, Putin has said that the collapse of the Soviet Union is one of probably the greatest regrets. He's not happy that that happened either.
Exactly. So they haven't forgotten any of this stuff. And that's why the Silk Road, the One Belt, One Road project, and as this continues to unfold and as this continues to get developed and becomes more of the global economic engine that it will be, then the West will play no role at all. It's not that they won't care about, the few scraps that we bring to the table, because they'll want them as well, but they won't matter. They will be inconsequential because they already have, China already has, they are the world's manufacturing base, and they have the people that need stuff. So now they're manufacturing as opposed to being external, they're looking more internal. And through the One Belt, One Road project, they've got this whole new customer base that they're setting up to service and
Hmm.
to be able to service and to not be concerned one bit about any of the sea lanes, which is the whole problem that China has right now, any of the sea lanes being choked by U.S. military. Well, you can't go that way because there's, U.S. military. Well, you can't go that way because there's U.S. military. Well, you can't go that way because there's U.S. military. All that's gone, all gone. So now they can just focus in on what needs to be focused on. And over the course of the next 20 years, I mean, the One Belt, One Road project, you have to understand, has been being planned for 15, 20 years at least.
Hmm.
I mean, it was February of this year that they sent the very first shipment out of China, and it went to Tehran. That's no coincidence that their first shipment went to Iran. That didn't just happen by happenstance. That was a signal to the West. We don't care about you. That was the signal. We're not concerned with your sanctions and your nonsense and your bloodthirst. We don't care.
You know
We're
what
moving
might
forward.
you know what might happen, Rory, as I'm listening, is instead of this globalization thing that's been going on for the last 150, 200 years, where you're getting these larger blocks and they've been attempting to globalize everything, it may turn into regionalization, especially if Trump gets in, because right now China is reliant on Europe and United States for its exports. That's where the bulk of their exports go. I think Europe's even bigger than the United States.
It is. That's their number one customer.
Right. And there's a potential, and a lot of people talk about how Europe may move closer to China to get those imports and kind of fall off in the United States. What might happen is you might get Western and Eastern trading blocks where if Trump does what he says he's going to do and slaps tariffs on Chinese goods and does a manufacturing renaissance in the United States and puts the jobs here, then you may just have regional trading and people consuming less imports and exports, less imports, depending on where you are, and consuming your own. So, for example, instead of China shipping all their stuff to Europe, or maybe they still ship to Europe, but maybe not as much as the United States, they'll consume locally, and then along the Silk Road, they'll sell their products, and the United States will not export the goods that it produces and consume them locally or within the North American area. So that's all quite possible. We've seen this inexorable rise towards globalism, but now we're starting to see it fray, and perhaps alliances will form where you have more regional trade and even regional currencies.
That's exactly not the currencies, but what you just described as far as the regional manufacturing and more localized economies. That's
Mhm.
what Catherine Austin Fitts has been talking about for 2 or 3 years, at least that long. I mean, as far as her slow burn theory playing out and it coming into fruition, which is where we're at, and that melding into the next scenario, which is more regional, more local manufacturing, more regional and localized economies. Like I said, I don't remember her speaking about currencies, but that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, you've already in the United States, there's already localized currencies.
Well, I
They're
didn't
all
mean
over the
localized to
place.
that point. What I meant was that the Chinese yuan doesn't have to become a global reserve currency.
They
It
don't
could be.
want it to be.
Well, that's what I mean. It could be there's certain obligations you have with that. It could be a regional currency. The Russian ruble can be a regional currency for just trade with, for example, just with Iran if they want. And instead of having one reserve currency, you have regional currencies where if you're going to trade in a certain area, you use yuan. If you're going to trade in the Western Hemisphere, you're going to use dollars. But it's not like you necessarily have to have one reserve currency.
Right. I mean, well, the world reserve currency system is going away. That's already been determined. That's leaving. How long
Well,
it's going to take, don't know. But
Well, it went
that whole
away in
system is
1970.
out.
It went away in 1971. It was only hastily put back together because of the genius of Nixon and Kissinger, or evil genius, by tying it to the oil and making Saudi Arabia only price their oil and only sell it for dollars. So that created an artificial demand for dollars. But yeah, so if countries, not people, create their own deals, then there's no real need to have a reserve currency,
No.
a
And
global a
what
global
and
reserve currency.
well, I mean, in what we're seeing, as far as you were saying that Europe moving closer to China, we're already seeing that. We're already seeing Greece talking to them about trade deals, and
Pipelines and things like that, right?
exactly, and France talking to them. I mean, as soon as,
Russia was the pipeline, not China, but
and
still, it's a part of the Eastern Bloc.
yes, and as soon as, if you remember, the gold initiative in France failed. And within 1 week of it failing, France announced that they were doing a direct currency swap with China. And I always said that that was a setup. And I still believe that. I still believe that it was a
Could be.
setup. And because I don't believe in coincidences. I haven't believed in them for a long time, and
What's that
that's not
quote
going to
by
change.
Roosevelt? If anything happens in politics, it happens for a reason.
Exactly. And so we're already seeing that. I
Right.
mean, as far as Europe moving closer to China, that's already happening. And as far as the United States moving away from China, that's already happening too.
If you get Trump, you definitely will move away from China.
As far as I think it's a pipe dream for people to believe that he's going to bring the jobs home. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that what could possibly happen is more along the lines of what you were saying, is that manufacturing has to be has to be regenerated here locally
Right.
or regionally because we can't get stuff anywhere else. Nobody wants to do business with us anymore.
Why would you want that? Well, what people also need to understand is the United States was not a dominant manufacturing country in 1938, 1939. World War II made it into that.
Right.
So it was really the industrial stuff was in Germany, and Germany was ravished too. So you can set up industry, especially in today's world, within a couple of years and get pretty good at it. Look how quick China became an industrial power.
Right.
If the circumstances are right and the labor is cheap, or it's cheaper to make than it is to import, can happen pretty quickly.
See, and I'm glad that you said that. I'm glad referenced a timeline because if you listen to that interview with Dr. Paul Craig Roberts that Greg Hunter did, he brought that up that what's really the burr in the side of the neocons is the fact that China has risen so quickly and that they were not anticipating their rise in such short order. They were anticipating a 25 to 50-year window and not a 5-year window. And it's kind
Well,
of, and they're like, well, we can't have that,
well,
you
look
know.
how America became, quote, the arsenal of democracy. Didn't it was very quick. And one thing about fascism and communism and so totalitarian governments, they can actually get that stuff because they mandate it, like Hitler and Roosevelt and Stalin. They can get the manufacturing up to speed. They just basically mandate that the entire population, women and children, start making munitions. And that's how what China did. It wasn't for a war effort, but it was a program where they made all those factories for the purpose of making cheap stuff to export to the rest of the world.
Right. And
And it
now they're,
happened faster than would have happened under capitalism. Now, long term, it's not sustainable because it's government run, but it's the same thing. And that's one of the kind of fears people have about Trump is that he is a nationalist and he may start nationalizing or putting incentives in place, which would be better, to get manufacturing going. But one of the things he could do would be basically to do tax free. This would drive people nuts, but if you open up a business and it's manufacturing, you owe no corporate tax for 5 years. Something like that, that would really push into manufacturing. Because right now, our economy is all based on financialization. That's why the banks are so powerful. It's
and
not based on
retail.
building. And yeah, and the retail comes from China and imports.
Right.
So there is no U.S. economy other than moving digits around on a screen and doing IPOs and mergers and selling and trading derivatives, and then
Well,
importing and buying stuff from China.
well, and the way that I've described it is that you have employees at Walmart eating at McDonald's and employees at McDonald's shopping at Walmart, and that's it. That's our
That's
economy.
well, yeah, exactly. And
And it,
instead, what you could have is people doing manufacturing and buying more expensive goods and services
and bringing research and development back, bringing innovation back.
instead of doing stock buybacks with the money that the companies might make.
Exactly. Well, well, Lewis, should we talk about precious metals, or have we talked
If
enough?
I think we'll save that for next time. I don't think people would listen through it, and I think we probably should do a setup, a show just on an update on the precious metals.
I think we should too. But this has been really good. I really like this a lot. But been speaking with Louis Cammarosno, and you can find all of Lewis's great work over at smallgold.com, and that's SMAULGLD.com. Louis, as always, appreciate the knowledge and appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me on, Roy.